All right, let's look at these wide receivers. And Ben, the guys we have at the top of our rankings: Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett. I think you could make a case for a few other guys who could be in the top three. How do you see the top of the board this week?
Yeah, there's several, and that's kind of going to be the case at receiver. It's interesting to have Lockett over Metcalf, and I think you said Diggs as well, right?
Yep.
I had Diggs on my list, but the one that I really want, and then Keenan Allen is another one that's tough to. And I even said I'm low on Herbert, but again, that's based on the expectation that Herbert's going to be a top 10 QB the rest of the way. And Keenan Allen just gets so much work. But the guy that I really want to drill into is Michael Thomas. He had a pretty easy 5 for 51 game in a game that that Breeze spread it around at a pretty historic rate. They're talking about that over the broadcast, that however many different guys caught passes. I think he ended up breaking an NFL record or something. But like everybody, the Water Boy caught a pass, and they absolutely dominated. They took the air out of the ball a little bit. Now they get San Francisco at home. I think it's a good week to be on New Orleans. Some of their key pieces. Somebody mentioned Breeze a little bit earlier as a solid play. Thomas is now going up against this defense that just had 10 catches put on them by Devontae Adams, 12 by DK Metcalf the week before, 14 by DeAndre Hopkins back in week one. They've given up double-digit catches to a lot of these elite number one type receivers. And then just sort of a reminder on Michael Thomas's upside. Like, he didn't play a ton in week 17 last year. He had not a great wild card game, but prior to that, through week 16 of last season, he closed the season with at least 8 catches and 100 yards in 8 of 9 games, TDs in 6 of them. If you're looking at like DK scoring particularly, it is just crazy how quickly he can get up there in scoring when he can catch 8 to 10 balls and hit that 100-yard bonus. He can hit 25 points easily without even scoring a touchdown. And then if you add in 1-2 touchdowns on top of that, he can completely break a slate. So I'm certainly going to have Michael Thomas exposure this week.
Okay, so you mentioned Michael Thomas, DK Metcalf, uh, Keenan Allen as guys who are near the top of the board for you. Anyone who's a little bit lower down that you think you will still be relatively high on this week?
Jarvis Landry in that high total game we talked about against Houston, he had 44% of the targets in that Week 8 win game before the bye. I think it was 11 targets. It wasn't a great atmosphere for passing. He had a touchdown overturned on a kind of a diving play. But with Odell Beckham out, there's a lot of opportunity in the Cleveland pass offense. This looks like a game where they will throw a little bit more than they usually do. And I expect Landry to get back to being sort of this high target guy that we've seen in his past. He's a really good season long buy low right now, where there was a lot of focus on Rashard Higgins and some other guys after Beckham went down. Richie James had this monster Thursday night game. Now we have Kendrick Bourne back on the COVID list. We might get Deebo Samuel back. We will get Brandon Ayuk back for San Francisco, but they still don't have Kittle. They still have a huge target vacuum. And Deebo, even when he's been healthy, has basically been playing a bit role. I mean, they've been almost all of his touches have been on these jet motion tip passes, and not at 100%. I don't think he's somebody that's going to really affect the downfield passing target shares. That's where Richie James was really good this past week. If he's in that Kendrick Bourne role, that third wide receiver role, even with Deebo in the lineup, I think he's a really good, cheap kind of punt DFS option. And we can go back to that well after he put up over 30 points. Really good correlation play with Michael Thomas too, or Kamara. I like getting into that game that way. And then another one is DJ Chark. We just talked about, again, the downfield passing from Luton. It's not a great matchup necessarily, but he locked onto Chark. We saw a top 5 air yards figure from Chark this week. That's a huge key to his potential to put up these splash weeks, is the air yards, the downfield passing. Matchup not being great. I still like Chark. I'm still bullish on Chark going forward because of the quarterback switch.
Ben, on Twitter, after Richie James went off and did what he did on Thursday Night Football, I started doing some research and posting some things on Twitter. And I'm sort of joking when I say this, but I'm sort of serious. Based on what Richie James did in college, and also, I mean, I don't want to count like high school numbers or anything, but sort of like the type of player that he is, and you can see that in his college numbers, his type of production. Based on his athletic testing and then analyzing his NFL production. He doesn't have much of it yet, but he's been pretty efficient when he's been getting his opportunities, and he's a pretty good return man. You put all of those things together, and I would say that he has maybe a 2% chance of turning into a low key version of awesome Antonio Brown. Do you think that 2% number is too high or too low?
I think probably too high. That was building to a crescendo, and ending on Antonio Brown was pretty fantastic. I don't know if 1 out of 50 times Richie James is going to have Antonio Brown type ceiling, but I certainly think everything you just said is a reason to be bullish on James going forward.
Okay, Shawn, who are you relatively high on?
I'm pretty high on KJ Hamler this week for GPPs. He's 3,800 this week. He faces the Raiders. And it does look like he's starting to break out now that he's healthy. He flashed a lot of his potential last week with his 6 catches for 75 yards and even got a carry for 15. Saw 10 targets. I think Drew Lock has also looked pretty good. The past 2 games, his confidence looks like it's there. So I kind of want to buy low on KJ Hamler before the inevitable really big breakout game. So I think he's worth a flyer at 3,800. Like I said, against this easy matchup against the Raiders. And the other guy, I mentioned him earlier, is John Brown. He's back in the wide receiver 3 discussion, certainly in play in GPPs at 5,300. He finally appears to be healthy again. He saw 10 targets last week, got eight catches for 99 yards. He's a sneaky stack with Josh Allen. Obviously, Allen and Diggs is the way to go. But, if you want to be a little bit contrarian, you can stack Allen with John Brown. And this is a hashtag revenge game at Arizona. So a nice little bonus there. But, I love Brown this week.
Love the call on KJ Hamler. Fantastic matchup against slot cornerback LaMarcus Joyner for the Raiders, who just allows seemingly every target in his direction to be completed. Chris, who are you relatively high on?
So I like Jerry Judy again this week in that same game. I like Hamler too, but Judy has been, really establishing a rapport with Drew Lock. Double-digit targets in back-to-back games, first 100-yard game last week, and he's still pretty cheap at 5,600 on DraftKings. So I think he might be the chalk this week. So we'll see how that goes. But I think every reason to be in lineups this week is in cash. And then going down the list, I think an interesting kind of tournament player, a guy that if you need some upside in your fantasy lineups, Jaylen Rager. 4,200, a guy that, came back, ran about 70% of the routes last week. But that was his first game back from injury. When he played his second straight game earlier in the year, it's the only time he's done that. He was up to 84% of the routes. And you would expect that because he's the outside guy. Ward is the slot guy. And you're going against the Giants. The Giants have had issues all season long at that number 2 corner spot. Ryan Lewis, they benched, I think it was Isaac Yiadom, or I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but they've had a revolving door at number 2, and Bradbury's playing well, so he'll probably be on Fulgham. So really like Jaylen Rager as kind of a sneaky tournament play this week.
All right, Raybon, to your point on Jerry Judy, he's really progressed in the last couple of weeks, and it's coincided with them moving him out of the slot and into the perimeter. And it's sort of like what we saw out of Justin Jefferson in week 3 when he moved from the slot to the perimeter. It's just really opened up Judy's game, and he's being targeted much more aggressively now, which is awesome. And in fact, that connection with Locke is at the point where Judy is now number 8 in the league in air yards and yards. Sorry, that was bad. Judy is now, one second, water is needed.
Too hot, Judy, too hot.
That was embarrassing. All right, and that connection is actually to the point where Jerry Judy is now number 8 overall in air yards and yards after the catch combined on a per game basis. And that's up there with guys who are at the top in the league, like Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. Those are the top 6. So this is a metric that actually kind of has some forward-looking significance. If a guy is popping in this, the odds are pretty good that he's going to end up putting up some fantasy points. So Jerry Judy, I'm with you there. He really is intriguing this week. Another guy that I like quite a bit is Terry McLaurin, who's number 3 on that list of air yards and yards after the catch combined. That Detroit pass defense is simply not good. McLaurin is just a total dominator in terms of the way that he's being used in that Washington offense. And I honestly don't think, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think that the switch from Kyle Allen to Alex Smith is going to be that big of a hindrance. It might be something that helps him a little bit. Maybe he has a quarterback who's a little more accurate in getting the ball to him. But I think that McLaurin is basically quarterback proof at this point in the way that DeAndre Hopkins for years was quarterback proof unless he had someone incredibly bad throwing to him in Houston. McLaurin just seems so talented that I think the quarterback almost doesn't matter. So McLaurin is a guy I like quite a bit. Ben, I fear that you're going to come in and be like, you know what? One guy I am low on is Terry McLaurin. And let me tell you why. But who are you low on this week?
No, definitely not low on him, but it's a very, qualified one. This is a guy I'm going to play in DFS. I'm going to start everywhere that I have him. Obviously, he's one of our top guys for the entire week, but I do think I'm a little bit lower than where I expect DeAndre Hopkins ownership to wind up. It's sort of, some of it is going to be a numbers game because I want to have exposure to Michael Thomas. I want to have exposure to several of these other top receivers we talked about. But even when I'm game stacking this game, I think I prefer Diggs on the other side. It's not necessarily a knock on Hopkins, but I think his production has been a little bit up and down. We have Kirk coming back this past week, was obviously Hopkins' worst game. Against Dallas, he had a long catch and run late that helped him wind up with a 2 for 73 line, but it was looking like a down game. He's had a couple of these games where the Arizona offense is resembling more closely kind of what some of us thought coming in, which was a more spread offense, that the target share would be more spread out. And again, with Kirk playing well lately and coming on, I'm just, and then also, I'm high on Chase Edmonds this week, taking up a large share of their offensive production. It's just sort of a thing where I wind up a little lower on Hopkins. I'm not happy about it. I'm probably going to get burnt.
Well, Ben, I don't know if this is a good or bad. It's probably a bad sign, let's be honest. But I'm right there with you. Hopkins is the guy that I was going to highlight. I have him ranked number 11 in our rankings. And as you say, his volume has tailed off since Christian Kirk returned in week 4. He has a tough matchup against Tre'Davious White, who has struggled a little bit this year, but I think is still one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And we saw last week with Xavier Howard, who was being used for the most part in shadow coverage on DeAndre Hopkins. We saw Kyler Murray exhibit the willingness to kind of take what the defense would give him and put the ball elsewhere. And if White is able to do a good enough of a job against Hopkins, I think we could see again a similar situation where Kyler Murray just takes what the defense gives him, doesn't force it to DeAndre Hopkins, and goes elsewhere. I still think of him as a wide receiver 1. He's still in the top 12, but more of a lower end wide receiver 1 as opposed to the top 5 guy that he typically is. Shawn, who are you low on?
I'm actually low on Michael Thomas. He's my wide receiver 11, so obviously he's a must start in season long leagues. But at 7,400, I just can't get there in DFS. The Saints made it a point to spread it around last week. I think they had 12 different pass catchers. So that's a problem for a guy like Thomas who kind of relies on volume. He's never been a huge touchdown guy, compared to his massive volume or yards per catch. So that's a big concern for me. They're favored by about 10 points this week. So I just don't see them giving Thomas a ton of targets here. So it's going to be another week for me to get him, inside my top 5, I think. And the other guy I'm low on is Travis Fulgham. He definitely deserves to be, Wentz's top target going forward. I just think that, Dallas Goedert and Jaylen Rager returned before the bye. They probably weren't 100% healthy. They should be much better coming out of the bye. And then we might be getting Shawn Jeffrey this week. I think I've said that every week so far, but I think when he returns, that's just going to lower Fulgham's target share just a bit. And I think he's been relying on that, to be a wide receiver 2. But I think going forward, he's going to be more of a low end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 once all these pass catchers get healthy.
Raymond, who are you low on?
Darius Slayton. Slayton is a guy who He's going to get blanketed by Darius Slay in this Philly game. Philly's allowing 36.9 schedule adjusted yards per game to wide receiver ones. So that's just not ideal. And then another guy is Henry Ruggs, the third. He's just not getting the targets that we need him to get. And Denver has actually been pretty good. We'll see if they get their, cornerbacks healthy, but I just don't see Derek Carr kind of testing his defense down the field when he's having success underneath with guys like Waller and Nelson Aguilar. So Henry Ruggs, even though he's running a good amount of routes, I don't think he's usable right now.
All right, Shawn, give us the prop.
I'm going with Cooper Kupp receiving yards. He's a guy where, he's my wide receiver 8 right now, and I'm worried that the next projection sweep I do, he'll be my top 5. So I need you guys to kind of temper my expectations here. But I have his over-under at 73.5 receiving yards.
Shawn, the problem is that I have Cooper Kupp as my number 2 wide receiver.
Oh, okay, perfect. So that's not going to help.
Yeah, I'm not going to help you temper your expectations. But he's got like a 26% target share, and it's a game that's probably going to be high scoring. He could be going against the number 3 cornerback. Number 3 slot cornerback. Let me rephrase that for the Seahawks. So it could be like one of the best matchups that any wide receiver has on the slate. And he had 21 targets the week before the bye. So I will take the over there, unfortunately, because I know I'm being very fishy here, but man, that 26% market share and the matchup, it really pushes the projection for me.
I agree.
I don't think you're being fishy at all. I think it's an easy over. I mean, the Seattle for the season is such a fantastic matchup for receivers, and there's a bunch of reasons for that, but it's going to continue. They're passing with intent. I talked about the early down pass rate over expectation stat earlier. That is such an important stat for the teams that are willing to, throw the ball. Obviously, they're passing with intent, but that leads to not just like more efficiency because passing is more efficient. It leads to more plays because incompletion stop the clock. It leads to more fantasy production for the whole offense across the board. And then Seattle also can't stop anything. So, we know this about Seattle, but I love, and then you're talking about third string slot cornerback. I mean, come on, you got to love the over.
Yeah, so I agree. I'm going over for all the reasons Ben and Shawn and Ben and Friedman just mentioned. 97% of the routes 2-3 games ago, then 91, then 98. Everyone was kind of concerned about Tyler Higbee and his role, but Cooper Kupp is running the most routes on the team now. He's up to 92% for the season. Only one time in the last 6 games was he under 91% of the routes per drop back. So he's going to be in the game, and I have Jared Goff projected for about 1.5 attempts, about one and a half attempts more than he usually throws, just because the Seattle defense has been kind of forcing, they play a shootout style. So they're forcing teams to pass more, and that's where they're vulnerable. They're really good at run defense is Seattle. So I doubt McVay is going to try to go crazy with the run game in this one, which is what they've been doing. So there's actually potential for even more because the Rams haven't been passing much aside from that last game.
All right,
Shawn.
top five, here we come. You guys didn't help. He's going there.
Yeah.
But I think, he's coming off that 20 target game, but he had the bye in between. So hopefully that limits the amount of point chasers that would be correct in chasing the points here. But yeah, hopefully his ownership isn't too ridiculous because he did have that bye to kind of, have people cool off on him a bit.
Yeah, Shawn, sometimes we'll have 3 people go against you and you're totally fine with that position. Is that a situation like that now? Or do you feel like, it was a line that was too low?
This helps. Honestly, this helps me be a little bit more confident moving him inside my top 5. I don't think, where'd you have him number 2?
Number 2.
I don't think he'll be that high, but he'll be in the top 5 after this.
I have him 6. So I still have 5 guys ahead of him. But, just kind of when you put his routes run together against the rest of his teammates, because remember, he's only really competing with Robert Woods. like the rest of these guys aren't getting heavily targeted. So